Hi, Professor Baldwin here. Beginning the asynchronous part to urbanism and digital narratives after COVID. Um, this will be a asynchronous class, so it'll cover many themes, and part of the overviews will be complemented by my commentary, I guess. Um, First of all, where do we start? What's the view? A couple things that I wanted to react to, which were fresh in my mind, was seeing Nomadland last night, and this is a movie of a woman who had left a town named Empire in Nevada that was a gypsum factory or had a gypsum factory, and the jobs dried up and the whole town closed up within 6 months. So this is typical of thought of the deindustrialization process that America and the West had gone through in general. Um, so this woman, instead of staying there or moving to other failed industrial sites, becomes a seasonal worker at an Amazon warehouse, and mostly during Christmas, and travels for the rest of her time in her van. What is interesting me for this class, a discussion of where we live, around what places do we choose to live, rurally, suburban, urban, or where we don't choose to live, is part of this new ethos where we can be anywhere and nowhere online, period. What the recent COVID pandemic has created in us is a feeling that we can have synchronous times without synchronous places, so that we could be anywhere. And certainly, this woman, played by Frances McDormand, is subscribing to this notion of any place, any time. Um, so I wanted to stay fresh with that concept of Nomadland in my head. Period. Um, what really impressed me about the film was that it seemed to be a combination of typical American transcendentalist thoughts and ideas in the film. The notion that you live with less, you travel with less, which harkens back to the New England transcendentalists, and specifically Thoreau, but also this notion probably introduced almost ironically by the female director Chloe Zhao, who is a Chinese national, educated in the United States at Mount Holyoke and NYU in film and independent filmmaking. It was a book well researched and well lived by Jessica Bruder. So within this, I say there's this separate tradition of Taoism. The cinematography of the wide open spaces, the life in the deserts of Nevada, Arizona, or the Southwest in general, the trip up Big Sur in California, where she visits a friend of hers' family, is indicative of this transcendentalist meets Taoist ethos, that we are nature, we have nature as a part of us, we live in nature, and that somehow this notion, as seen in a slight bit of conflict when she calls out her real estate brother-in-law or some friend of real estate as she goes back to her sister place on selling houses, selling properties, selling the idea of ownership to people who can't even afford it. She is, in a sense, calling out in this self determination that her nomadic lifestyle is not to be feared, as many of the people who've subscribed to ownership of houses and mortgages they can't even afford, but also to a way of life that is essentially a scam. As Native Americans, as transcendentalists, as Taoists philosophically subscribe to, that we can never really own a bit of physical reality, especially in the sense that we have a limited lifespan, and that nature, a recurring theme in all of this, travels within us. So through these three remarkable women auteurs, Frances McDormand, the author Jessica Bruder, who did travel in a van to travel with these nomadic tribe people, Americans, and with Chloe Zhao, we have this aspect of discovering the nature within them and without. What is remarkable about this film, in expecting a Hollywood example of brutal violence that would turn the film around, assault or robbery or something, there was a gentleness and, in a sense, realism, that all the nomads were gentle, treated each other gently, were well aware of the inequities within their lives, economic inequities, and it culminates in a beautiful return that Fern does as she goes back to her town of Empire. And as she says, my house was at the edge of this beautiful woods and a beautiful landscape. And I looked out at the mountains. And sure enough, she goes back. The town and the houses are empty. She walks through the empty rooms and looks out at the mountains. And we feel that she is coming to terms with something that is inevitable, a return to nature, appreciating the nature within herself, and an acceptance that no matter how we put up these rigid categories of urbanism, physical environment, suburban environment, rural agrarian environment, must call attention to the nature within. It's very refreshing that there was no approach to violence or some incident in a typical Hollywood scripting sense, that this gradually had this effect on me as a viewer, that this is not just sadness being and living alone in your van, but an unraveling to a truthfulness of the way of all flesh. That's the start of this class. Perhaps the film will do justice to the larger themes and concepts within this class.